Hello YouTube, this is your resident Land Cruiser nut. Today, based off some comments, I want to do a more thorough video on my tire carrier build. This video is going to be more of a voiceover using photos from my build and also ones I pulled from the ones on the old interweb. Keep in mind that this is going to be specific to an 80 series Land Cruiser, but you know, you can take some of the tips and tricks and apply them to other vehicles. Also understand that there's going to have to be some thoughts and consideration based on your wheel and tire package. Okay, so getting into it, let's just kind of jump right into this photo. For this build, some of the things you're going to need is a spindle. Mine is from Comp 4x4. I don't think they are in business anymore, but there are other spindles that are of equal quality and value. Also, you're going to need a spring action locking pin and a latch action toggle clamp. I'll put all these items in a link below, and you can find them on Amazon. Also, you're going to need 2 sticks of 2x2 3/16 square stock, and you could also use 2x4 3/16 square stock as well for some of this. You don't need to buy the 2x4 square stock. I used 2x2 throughout this whole process, and I welded it together when I needed to get the 4 inches. I will leave that to whatever you can find in your local area and also the cost. Looking at this image, you're going to see some of the reference points that I used for the build. One is I put the spindle directly below the tail light so that it would not impede, you know, the visibility of the brake lights or the turn signals, and I wanted it in that location so also that the tire would not block any of those. Now keep in mind, if you do go with a larger tire, you might have to reconsider some of these dimensions. This setup that I have right here will fit up to a 35-inch tire without having to change any of the dimensions. Next is the length. Now you can go all the way across the vehicle if you want, but I chose to go only halfway, and I centered it onto really the center of the vehicle between where the pintle mounts, the bolt holes for the pintle mounts go. Okay, on to the next image. One of the things I forgot to mention in the previous image was that I'm running a 33-inch tire. You're going to have to factor that into all of your considerations for your measurements. The one that I built for my 80 series that we're going through now will accommodate a 35-inch tire. But if you go any larger, you're going to look at the possibility of having your tail light blocked and a couple other things. So just keep that in mind. And then as we get into this process more, I have a bunch of photos that I can show you. Just remember, before you start doing any of this, go ahead and disconnect your battery beforehand. That way it's really the first thing you do, because you're going to be welding on the vehicle, and we just want to make sure we protect ourselves and the electrical systems of the truck. Okay, looking at this image, I have the bumper cap removed from the left hand side. I'm cutting off the bumper support bracket, and you will see in the next photo when I talked about you're going to need a 1/4-inch square plate. You're going to see why you will need that, and it's mainly just to provide some more support for the tire carrier. Okay, now we see the bracket as it's been cut off and cleaned up the area here. This is where I welded another 1/4-inch plate because I wanted to make this just a little bit thicker, because you're going to need that added strength. You got to think, if you're doing a lot of off-roading, a lot of things are going to be moving around, and you just want to provide an added safety component to this. So again, I added that 1/4-inch plate there, and then I welded to it just to make sure everything was going to be secure and really stable. Okay, so we're just moving on to the next step now. This isn't my truck, but I followed this exact method and pulled a lot of information from it. Here you can see the spindle sleeve, and before I talk about it anymore, the spindle that I got from Comp 4x4 was 6.5 inches long. you probably want to go find one that's similar length to get you the distance that you're going to need to clear the factory bumper. Going on, you can kind of see back here is where I welded on, and he did too, the plate that we're gonna weld this support beam on. So I'll call it the spindle support beam. On my truck, from the frame to the spindle was 8 inches. That 8 inches gets you directly in center with the tail light, and it'll put you right below it. So that's really your first measurement. The other thing that I had to do it, and whoever built this one had to do it too, was cut this off at a 45, I don't want to say it was a 45-degree angle, but it was cut just enough of it off that you could put the bumper sleeve back on. Because when I tried to put it on the first time, this was hanging down too low and it kept it from sitting correctly. So you'll just need to cut a little bit off the bottom in order to get everything back assembled together. Okay, so once you get everything mocked up, you get it all tacked together, you can really start the finishing up this process. Thing to figure out is actually sticking the spindle down inside the sleeve, and you can see here where it was tacked to the proper height. Just be careful as you're doing this, because you can expand the metal on this sleeve if you heat it up too much. So just tack it in at first and just be very ginger when you weld all this in, or if somebody's welding it for you, because if you do it incorrectly, you'll have a hard time getting the spindle down inside of the sleeve. So really the last thing to do is just paint everything after you get it all to kind of keep it from rusting, and let it kind of dry. Basically it was fast acting dry. I was able to get mine done probably in an hour. You can see here that this was a piece of 4-inch square stock. Again, if you don't have square stock available, you can do 2-inch square stock and just weld it together, and then use some filler to fill in the seams, and just paint it that way. This isn't going to be seen, so it's not a big deal as long as you got paint on it. Okay, looking here, as you can see, we got the spindle all put back together, and it's time to really start assembling the main structure. I went ahead and jumped ahead to this image so that you can see that I used 2x2 all through this to create that 4 inches, and then tacked it all together. I don't know if you can see this in the camera, but I'll show another image. This had to be sliced with an angle grinder and kind of bent, because like I said, the back of the Land Cruiser isn't perfectly flat, and you kind of got to curve this whole beam around the back of the truck. I have an image here that I will show. Let's see if I can pull it up, of what that looks like. There we go. You can see here where the bend is. It comes out and it just then shoots straight back that way. So now you have an idea there of how that has to be done. Going back to this, again, it'll cover a 33-inch tire, but if you're gonna do this, this post needs to be 15.5 inches. With that 15.5-inch post right there, that will allow you to go up to a 35-inch tire if you choose to go that route. Okay, now we're moving on to the post here that attaches to the tire carrier plate. This is the other part where your tire and wheel package kind of matter. This distance for mine is 7 inches from here to here. Now that's taking account for the back spacing of the wheel. You have to know what your back spacing is, so you're going to have your tire and your wheel kind of there with you to kind of mock this up. If I don't know, this is an FJ Cruiser wheel. I don't know what the back spacing and offset is on those, but I was just the whole time having this wheel on standby as I was building this to get this measurement. So it might change depending on the wheel package, tire and wheel package that you're going to use. Okay, the other part that matters is the pitch of this. If you look here, you see that it's not coming out perfectly level. It's actually pitched up. That is going to help hold the tire onto the plate and actually allow this whole tire carrier to kind of hold the weight centered. So it doesn't have to be pitched up that much. You just want to pitch it up just enough to help the tire carrier hold some of the weight. So that's the really the critical parts of this that you need to remember. Okay, so this is the tire carrier after it's all painted. Again, you can see the other videos I have describing this, but like I just said, I just cut these at 45-degree angles and tacked them in and welded them up, sanded them down, painted, and that really provides support for this main beam that's going up for the tire carrier. This was a really fun project, a lot of learning. What I wanted to do is give everyone a little bit more detail on how it's done and kind of what needs to be accomplished in order to build this. You're going to be taking off, putting back on, taking off, putting back on a lot of things. So it's just going to be part of it. But I like I said, just really wanted to help someone. If you have any more questions, feel free to email me or just put a comment below. As usual, please like this video, share it, and subscribe. Thank you very much.